Right around the time I moved back home after college, which was humiliating enough, my parents started feeding stray cats in our backyard. They would buy these huge tins of Walmart cat food, and when you turn them over, nothing happened at first. But a moment later, the horse meat inside started quivering, and then and it would plop down, and then this gravy would dribble out afterward, and it just smelled terrible. But because this was wintertime in South Dakota, the cats actually got pretty desperate over even this food. I would be lying in bed at night, and I would hear shrieks and howls from the backyard, and I would peek through my bedroom curtains, and I would see this Tasmanian devil tornado of fur going around. And not infrequently, there would be blood on the concrete the next morning. So clearly it made sense to take some of these cats into our home as pets. They deserve a good life too, my mother said. So she brought in a long-haired tabby named Ignatius, and then another tabby named Madeline. And you know, life's little blessings, Madeline was pregnant, so out popped Cassandra and Oliver. Now, I mostly ignored these cats, except for one thing. I'm a science guy, and I had just picked up this classic book on animal behavior. And it argued that all animal behavior is programmed, whether by genes, by environment, hormones, whatever. All animal behavior is programmed. And the author was an ant expert. So it was easy to think about ants as like these little chemical zombies running around with no free will. But he started working his way up through the animal kingdom, through fish, through reptiles, through birds, and then mammals, like cats. And that's when the book started to get a little eerie, because one thing he mentioned was that overcrowding really changes animal behavior. Even really friendly animals get very aggressive and territorial when they feel overcrowded. And I noticed this coming true in my own life because my mother took in a fifth cat, Elliot. And it was like there was a phase shift, like it just pushed the Kean cat population a little over the edge. Because suddenly Ignatius was crawling up onto the windowsills and he would pounce onto the other cats. And Cassandra would sharpen her claws on the furniture in fury. And worst, Oliver and Elliot were getting into literal pissing matches. They would spray the living room curtains, basically to mark territory. And the book predicted all of these kind of things would happen, and it was really eerie how accurate it was. Still, you know, at the end of the day, these were cats. They were beasts. You know, of course something like overcrowding could override their basic decency. And then my brother moved back home after college. So now we had 4 adult Homo sapiens living in one house. And you know, we actually had a nice little honeymoon of family togetherness. My family really can be great sometimes. But then that cold South Dakota winter closed in on us. And the changes were subtle at first. You know, it seemed like somebody was always stomping up and down the stairs or knocking on the bathroom door. And I just started feeling more, I guess the word is territorial. Like, I started hiding my things and hoarding my groceries. I just didn't want anyone around. And then my mother, you know, instead of us having a nice conversation about my writing, she would come up to me and say something like, "So when are you gonna get that writing job you keep talking about?" And I would turn and face her, and I would jab back, and, you know, pretty soon I had pushed her too far. And when I'd done this, she would actually grunt at me. Her neck would swell up, her face would flush red. It was like this guttural scream in her throat. She would go, "Argh!" And when she pushed me too far, I would get sputtering angry, and I couldn't think of anything to say, so I would make a face at her. I would lower my eyes, and I would bare my lower canines like this. I didn't realize it, but these are both classic territorial displays. For his part, my brother said, "I have got to get out of this zoo." So he went and joined the local gym, and he put on something like 30 extra pounds of muscle. He became the alpha male, the silverbacked gorilla of our household. And meanwhile, I'm plugging away at this book, completely oblivious, working toward the final section on primate behavior. And one thing it said is that primates, when they feel threatened, sometimes they withdraw from social contact. Well, the weird thing was, I noticed my father was running a lot of useless errands to the office at night. And then he would come back and sit down in front of these reruns of MASH. It was really depressing. And then my brother and I noticed we weren't going out very often. We weren't washing our hair as often as we probably should have been. We grew out these hideously patchy neck beards. We basically stopped grooming ourselves. And I was looking at my beard in the mirror one day when I realized that I'd become an ape from that book. And when I realized this, it was a real punch in the gut. I mean, we all want to think about ourselves being autonomous and having free will, but you can't fool biology. And the only thing I could think to do was just keep reading ahead and see what was going to happen to me next. And that's when I read something that was simultaneously scary but hopeful. And that's that adults, or primates, when they're on the cusp of adulthood, disperse. They leave their home tribe and go make their own way in the adult world. And that's when I realized that I had to escape. So I took an internship in St. Louis, a city where I knew no one. And of course, as soon as I announced I was leaving, that honeymoon of family togetherness came back. And on the day I left, my parents gave me a big hug. And as I was pulling out of the driveway, I actually got a little choked up. I got a little teary. Because as much as I'd hated being there, one big theme of the book, besides all the overcrowding stuff, was that family is really, really deeply rooted inside you. That's as biological as anything. And again, you can't fool biology. But about 20 minutes later, I hit the open highway. And it was like my soul just opened up, because I looked to my left, and then I looked to my right, and there was no one there. If there's one thing the prairie has a lot of, it's space. And there were no adults around for the first time in as long as I could remember. And I was just thinking that this must be what it's like when an animal escapes from the zoo for the first time. Or probably more accurately here, this must be what an ape feels like when he finally moves out of his parents' house, ditches their 5 strangely named cats, and strikes out on his own for the very first time. So, thank you.